together to talk about all the things we used to do. The laughs, the passions, the little Sebastians, the pits we fell into. And we're putting it all in a podcast, then we'll send it up into the sky. We're calling it Parks and Recollection. Come on, little podcast, spread your wings and fly.
Welcome to Parks and Recollection, our podcast where we visit our old friends in Pawnee, one episode at a time. I am literally Rob Lowe, and I'm here with my co-host, Alan Yang.
What up, Rob?
Alan Yang has been writing on Parks and Rec since he was a wee puppy.
Yeah, it's been a long time, but it's been funny watching the episodes because I haven't seen them in a while, and it's like, man, it's like a different world. Seeing all these actors, they look different, and it's just like we're in a different part of our lives back then for sure.
And today's episode is the canvassing episode, which is the second episode ever of the show that aired on April 16th, 2009. That feels like a million years ago. Written by Rachel Axler and directed by Seth Gordon. Now, do you remember Seth Gordon, the director? Because is he the same Seth Gordon who I remember as an actor in the late 70s and 80s? Am I right or am I wrong?
I think it's a different Seth Gordon because I believe this Seth Gordon came from the world of documentary. He did a documentary called King of Kong, which is an excellent documentary, and then he went on to do a bunch of movies and stuff. So it was great to have him on board. He's a very successful director, and I think this was pretty early on in his career. So I think it might be dueling Seth Gordons.
The world can never have too many.
That's what happens.
I would like to hand it over to you, Alan. Give us our synopsis on what this episode did.
Leslie Knope, played by Amy Poehler, plans for an upcoming town hall meeting about her proposal to turn the pit into a park. She invites her mother, Marlene Griggs Knope, but Marlene only feigns interest. Leslie holds a subcommittee meeting, and city planner Mark warns her it might be too early for a meeting with the public. Leslie, however, remains confident about the meeting and says the gang will be doing neighborhood canvassing to try to win support for the park. But the canvassing is a total bust. Only citizens against the park show up to the meeting and loudly voice disapproval in an attempt to turn the meeting. Yeah, classic town hall. Second town hall in 2 episodes. In an attempt to turn the meeting around, Leslie tries several tactics, like planting intern April in the audience and droning on about construction specifics. But eventually, Leslie resorts to filibustering herself to save the project from complete shutdown. After an intense public comment flogging, Leslie emerges victorious and the park project is not derailed. So that's a very quick summary of this episode.
Listen, the reason we're doing this podcast is so many people love it, and we love it, and we love our experience doing it, and it's fun to go back and look under the hood. But that said, when I looked back at this episode, I'm struck by a couple things, and I want to ask you, Alan, because you were there.
Please. I was a young pup doing the best I could contribute.
All right, so here is my question. First of all, I was stunned to meet Leslie Knope's mother. Now, maybe I wasn't paying attention, which is entirely possible, but I don't remember Leslie Knope's mother in my 4 years on the show. Am I wrong?
It's wild. It's wild. It's wild. So, yeah, it opens with us, Marlene, and you're like, man, now I remember being in the writer's room talking about, okay, well, we want to give this show something of an emotional hook in addition to the work stuff. And I think the logic was, okay, obviously she cares about the pit and the park and Ann Perkins, who she just met, but it's like, do we need emotional heft? So we had her seek her mother's approval. So that's like the beginning of this episode. And, again, I was not in charge of the show. This is purely Mike and Greg, who are the showrunners, like making these creative decisions. But, I think it's at the time, we talked about the pilot, right? We talked about the pilot last episode, and generally the pilot is widely conceived to be the hardest episode to write. But I think a close runner-up is episode 2. Because episode 2, you're like, okay, we have the show, we have a setup. We talked about premise pilot versus new guy pilot versus sort of a regular episode of the show version of a pilot. Parks, as we talked about, is kind of a premise pilot, right? We set up what the show is. It's Leslie finding this pit and deciding to turn it into a park, meeting Ann Perkins, all of that stuff. Okay, great. If you have a premise pilot, it's not really a typical episode of the show. A premise pilot sets up the world. Then you're essentially kind of in episode 2 figuring out what the show is and how these characters interact. And I think, Rob, I think you totally picked up on something interesting, which is Parks and Rec started out as a workplace show, but not all the characters were in the same workplace. Because you got Leslie and Tom and April and Ron, they're kind of in the same office. But then a lot of the other characters are different, have different jobs, they're in different parts of the world. You got Mark, who's a city planner, you got Ann, who's a nurse, and then you have Andy, who's just Ann's boyfriend. So there was a challenge early on in the show of trying to bring these characters together and put them in the same stories. And so this episode, it's done by putting them on a committee together, and then the workplace, the quote-unquote workplace, is just their sort of goal of getting this park made. So, I mean, this took a lot of work, man. It took a lot of work in the writer's room.
I mean, that first scene with Leslie Knope and her mother, I mean, that was some full Sandra Bullock 1990s movie, Steel Magnolias stuff going on there, man. That was heavy.
And don't you feel bad for Leslie? It's like, man, you think about these later seasons, she's so upbeat, and then in these early episodes, she's just kind of getting shit on by people. Like, man, I feel bad for her. Like, her mom's being mean to her. It's like, no, don't be mean to Leslie. I love Leslie. But you're so early on in the show, we didn't, we weren't doing that yet.
Parks somehow lived to fight another day. And when you look back on it, the number one thing that's so different is Leslie just gets hammered all the time in these early episodes.
It's going to be a recurring theme on this show that, thank God, NBC let the show live, right? NBC let the show live, let it sort of get air on, get sort of the ground under its feet and figure out its way and became the show we know and love. But without that, I think it's tough, right? Because some shows don't spring fully formed in the first couple episodes, and that's certainly the case with this one. So as I said, you're looking to sort of figure out all the character dynamics. Episodes 2, 3, 4. You're trying to figure out, what we would call in the writer's room sometimes an episode, a UR-episode, basically. Like, what is the sort of elemental version of the show? What are the main conflicts? What are the sort of, what is the ideal version of an episode of Parks look like? And so you can figure out, like, in this episode, like, we're still trying to sort of gain our footing. And like you said, Ron and Leslie were usually opposed. In this one, Ron's pretty light. You think about Parks, you think about Leslie and Ron, kind of the two, hugest characters in the show, and Ron's pretty light in this one. So, I think we're still figuring it out. And just a window into the process of writing these episodes, we rewrote episode 2 for like 12 weeks. We rewrote episode 3 for like 8 weeks. And then episode 4 happened to be one that I wrote the first draft of, and after that draft, we had to shoot almost immediately. So we just ran out of time. Like the shooting kind of, it's like you spend like 3 months rewriting the first couple, and there's like, oh shit, we got to shoot Monday. And it's like, I'm not trying to divert blame on that, but it was certainly, I remember me and Greg and Mike, and we got together at some point. It was just like, oh shit, we got to shoot this on Monday. And it catches up with you, man. It catches up with you. So yeah, it's just figuring out the show. And these were late nights, I remember.
When people ask what it's like to do a network television show, not a streamer. A streamer, you sip espressos all day and tell people, I don't feel like delivering my episodes until I go to the south of France for 6 weeks. That's the way they do it over there.
Sounds like you're describing my life. No, I'm kidding.
The season I decided we don't want to make another season of Master of None until I explore the Dalai Lama's life in Tibet for 6 months. And they go, great, do it.
Don't spoil our next season. Yeah, don't spoil our next season.
But on network TV, I feel like the schedule is so unrelenting that it feels like you're hanging over the front of the engine of a freight train, laying down the rails.
It 100% feels that way because it's so relentless, right? It's so relentless, and Rob, you know this. So the writers will work on the script for a long time, right? So we'll break the story, we'll write the outline, we'll send it to networks to studio, they'll give us notes, we'll rewrite, comes back to the room, rewrite, come back, punch up the jokes. Then you do a table read. So generally the table read is, a week before you shoot. And by the way, if that read goes poorly, which every show has reads that don't go perfectly, you might start from scratch. And once I'm looking at producer Greg right now. He remembers, but you might have to start over, and that means you're Frankensteining a script, which means that all the writers are pitching in and writing different scenes, and that's how you get behind, right? So you're trying to stay ahead. You're trying to have scripts ahead of time, but man, it is exactly like that train track metaphor you said, because you just fucking run out of time. It's just
run out of time.
It's too many episodes. We've only made 25 episodes of Master in like 7 years. It's insane.
That defies logic.
Well, it's impressive that they make any sense, much less that they're good. But yeah, I mean, look, it's so crazy to watch this episode. So if people are watching along, you even see moments where Leslie is unethical. right? She starts out, she talks about cheating in high school. It's like, Leslie doesn't cheat. Like, she doesn't cheat. She's a paragon of virtue. Like, how dare you do that to Leslie? But you know, again, that's the kind of thing where you're just kind of calibrating the character and kind of calibrating where the comedy comes from, right? And in this one, again, it keeps coming back to, it feels like in these episodes, it's everyone in the world against Leslie.
I was shocked by that moment, actually, that little moment where Leslie talks about cheating and also sort of her edge.
Yeah.
She's always been ambitious. This ambition had a little bit of edge to it. So I'm curious about the two, like the speech she has in this episode about cheating when she was young. There's that version. But then there's the version where she finds her voice, and it would be something like this. You tell me if I'm wrong. This is how the character would change. She'd be like, yes, I cheated in junior high. And then I did not leave my room for the depression that I had for 6 months. That would be the Leslie Knope we know and love. Or it would be, turns out everybody in my class cheated. I, of course, did not.
Yes.
And that's what it would be, right?
You're right on it. And you should, let's do season 8 right now. Let's do that episode first. Rob, you get a written by credit. We'll pitch it out together. Yeah, no, totally. And I think one of the things, again, season 1, you were trying to not only figure out the characters, one of the most important things when you're writing comedy is, what are the characters' flaws? Like, that is ultimately, you know, in drama as well, right? What are their flaws? What draws you to them? What are their vulnerabilities? A flaw also gives you a comedic game. And so in this episode, you can feel the writers figuring it out. Obviously, Amy figuring it out along with us. And in this one, she's a little bit immoral. And I think later on, exactly what you said, her flaw would be she cares too much. She's too pure. She's too overbearing. She's too good at her job. And in these early episodes, you know, you're still looking for, maybe she's a little bit unethical, or maybe she's, you know, a little bit insecure and all that stuff. And it's kind of fascinating if you're a fan of the show to see that stuff change over time.
I always wondered too, again, because this show started at its first iteration with the network going to Greg Daniels going, The Office is a massive hit. We love it. Would you do a spinoff? And obviously it became Parks and Rec. But I always wonder if this early Leslie we're seeing isn't really without an unconscious or conscious version of a female Michael Scott.
I mean, I can't speak for those guys. I'm sure when you make a massive world-changing hit, it's in your DNA a little bit, right? You think back to the lessons you learned on that show. You think back to those lessons, and I'm sure they're like, well, yeah, look, in that show, you get a lot of comedy about the boss making mistakes and being a very inappropriate character. But you realize, look back, they're completely different shows. And that's, again, sort of a good reminder that you have to write to the talents of your performers, number one. And number two, you know, having Mike in the mix was interesting because Mike became such a creative voice for the show and you know, ultimately ran the show for the later seasons. And his ethos is a little different from The Office's. It was a little bit less cringy comedy and a little bit more hopeful, optimistic, heartfelt comedy. And I think you see, just like you said, Rob, when you were saying, you know, well, season 4, Leslie, would be this. I think we actually see inklings of that later on in the episode when she does the filibuster, because that is sort of comedy of her solving the problem and being hyper competent and being smart and doing something that, yes, is funny, but also is more in character of her being super sort of hyper competent and figuring something out and doing kind of the right thing. And you know, later on in the episode, or later on in the series rather, we see more examples of that, where she brings everyone together, she does something crazy, but all in the interest of getting the job done. So that's kind of, you know, what the filibuster is. That was something we kind of gleaned from some of the research we did. We actually went to some town halls.
When the filibuster happened, I was like, this is the beginning of the show we know and love. That moment where she filibusters. First of all, it's laugh out loud funny. And it's the comedy, as you say, of her being super diligent at what she does in a really, and using that as an opportunity for comedy and not plot.
Yes. I got a note from the producer here that says, take credit for the filibuster. It was your idea. Here's my thing about taking credit for ideas. I don't remember almost anything like that I came up with. Like, I always, like, I hate to take credit for anything because I'm always like, did I come up with that? And by the way, that's a big thing in writers' rooms where people will fight, like, after the fact. It's like, that was my joke. It's like, no, that was my joke. And people will, like, argue over credit. I'm just like, look, man, everyone writes everything. Even if an episode has your name on it, everyone worked on it. There's very few things that I remember. Like, I wrote that. Like, I almost don't care, but I also am like, man, like that's a hard thing for me to say. I definitely took credit for that. If Greg, if you're telling me I wrote it, maybe it's in the notes, but I don't know. I can't remember.
Alan Yang has fingerprints, let's put it that way, are all over the filibuster moment in this episode, which for me is the quintessential moment. The other thing I notice is so much of these episodes would have comedy in them in the later episodes, and in these early episodes, they're sort of plot. Like there's just a little thing where they come into I think it's Anne's house, and Pratt's character is playing rock band, right?
Yeah,
and there's like, I mean, there's that joke. That's the joke, but there's no other joke around that. And I promise you, in season 2. There would have been all kinds of jokes about like what song, talking heads about why they were playing that song. By the time I got on the show, you'd have the famous candy bags, and the candy bags, right? That's what we called them, right?
Yeah.
Candy bag. And the candy bags were a list of jokes, sometimes 20, that when you did your talking head, you would do, and maybe they would use them and maybe they wouldn't, but you had to do them. And that's how comedy-driven the talking heads became. Is in this episode, this episode number 2, the talking heads are just. That's why it was important for us to go to the meeting. It's like really Dragnet style exposition almost.
It's almost like it actually is like a documentary, which we went away from a lot in later seasons. But yeah, that scene where they walk in on Andy and Mark and April playing Rock Band kind of made me laugh looking back at it, because there was a period of time in the writer's room where we had Rock Band in the office. And it was the most massive time waster I've ever seen on any show I've ever worked on. We would play for hours. And it was like Mike would play with us. So he's the boss. So we were just like, yeah, if we're going to play let's play another Beatles song on Rock Band, we would play for hours. So that was a huge time waster. So it made me laugh to see them play My Own Worst Enemy by Lit. And then the other thing was Andy talks about his band in this episode. I forget about how early that comes up. He talks about the band. And in this band, the band has a very off-color name. He says the band's called Just the Tip. And then that band, I guess, would become Mouse Rat. And in the public forum, he's like, yeah, we're looking for a bassist. Like, we need a bassist. That bassist ends up becoming me in the later episodes. I'm like, that's me. I guess I applied. Like, I heard about that from the thing. So that was very funny to me.
You always wanted to be in the band. Come on. You were in that writer's room lobbying. What did Mike Schur play in Rock Band? What instrument was his instrument?
He kind of did everything. We didn't have a ton of great singers in the room, so that was always kind of an embarrassing thing. It was always like, just kind of getting along. I don't think anyone was super good at the game, but as we played more, I think we got better and better. But
if you're a writer out there and you're listening to this, be a comedy writer, because in those writers' rooms, you get to play Rock Band. For me, sometimes the best bits aren't necessarily the performances or the writing or any of it. Like, it's the technical stuff of how you make a TV show, which I continue to love, even though this is my business. I love, how people make a television show. And one of the things I noticed about this episode is there's one car scene. It's clearly the first car scene in the series. And I'm telling you what, I promise you they shot this episode with store-bought GoPros. They did not have it together at all. It's like, like the old GoPros that you were first out, where everything was like vaguely a sort of fisheye lens, sorta. So your face was like just a smidge distorted. That's what that scene was. I was like, wow, okay.
Yeah. The other thing I noticed is like some of the talking heads were just super profile. Like, you don't see their faces. Like, there's like one with their mom. It's like, wait, what is this? Like, I can barely see her. Just a different filmmaking technique. Like, that's what I would shoot for a drama or something. Yeah, it's like an A24 movie. It's like,
yes,
handheld, and you're like pointing. It's like, yeah, like, like very slant.
It's a Robert Eggers movie. It's like the fucking Lighthouse.
Yeah, I was like, man, the Parks and Rec season 1 going wild with the cinematography. But,
well, listen, don't get me started on this one. So what is you guys have a name for it? I used to know it. I'm aged and can't remember anything. When there are private scenes that in theory the documentary crew wouldn't be allowed to be in, they always shot them through windows or a distance. And what was that called? It was on the slug line, it would say.
I certainly remember enjoying writing those scenes, because you would get not only through the performance.
Spy Shot.
Spy Shot. That's what it was. Spy Shot. You remembered. So see, your
I did
brain's
not
still
remember.
working.
That's Greg Levine, who is the
Okay.
quickly becoming
Sorry,
the
it was in
MVP.
God,
Greg, it's clear.
I'm so glad Greg is in the room here.
And Greg Levine not only wrote on all of Parks and Recreation, but more importantly, he ran the computer in the writer's room.
Yeah, absolutely. But I can't believe, I can't remember that. But, there's an intimacy there, and we would use those scenes, again, like you said, to show when there's something that they don't want the documentarians to know. And there's immediately, just filmmaking wise, and much later in my career, I started directing and figuring this stuff out. But you get this extra layer that's really, really powerful. And so I think, we didn't want to overuse it either, but we do use it once in this episode. I think it's like through the door,
And in this episode, and what I couldn't believe was this spy shot, the way it was shot made it look like the spy was a stalker and was going to come and murder people. This episode was brought me completely back. I remember that house. Oh, I remember that barking dog. This is the weird stuff that actors notice. There's an off-camera dog barking during someone's coverage in this and the canvassing, and the sound is awful.
It's real, man. It's real.
It's like you guys really were going for the documentary stuff, because by the time I got there, hold it, please. The dog barking 5 blocks away. Can we get somebody on that, please? Could somebody just hold it, just sit in the sun.
It's really true. I mean, I think we really, again, I think every show takes on a life of its own, right? And I think this is, one of the examples of we tried, I think season 1, it came based on some of the research that, again, the show did as a whole. And I think some of the ideas Mike and Greg had where, before this episode and before the writer's room, we went to Claremont City Hall and we talked to a city manager and a city planner, and we learned about, they to Mike and Greg's credit, they wanted to learn what the actual process was if this were real. Like if this were a real documentary, if there were a pit and people were trying to make it into a park. We talked to the people in local government and they just laughed. They're like, it'll take years. He's like, it'll take years. There'll be so many steps and it will be annoying as fuck. Like, it's going to be really annoying. Like, it's just going to be really annoying. And, I think that gave Mike and Greg some ammunition, and it inspired them, because they're like, okay, this seems like fertile ground for a show. And the other thing we did was we sat in on town halls, and it was not too dissimilar from what we see in the show, which is a lot of people going on and talking and talking and talking, and a lot of them not making any sense. I'm not saying everybody. I'm not saying these town halls are a waste of time. They're the lifeblood of our democracy. But a lot of the people at the town hall are not really making a ton of sense, and a lot of the city council members are doing nothing. They're just not even listening, and they're just making notes or doing other shit all the time. And so that was kind of, we're like, oh, real life is pretty funny in this respect. And I think we kept putting those town halls into the show because it was people rambling on. And some of the people we put in, you think what they say is crazy. Like there's some wilder stuff that happens at those meetings. If you ever sit in on them, you can sit on them virtually now. I think you can just go, you go to the meetings. And I actually know a friend of mine is on the LA City Council now. I'm like, man, that is a tough job. That is a tough job.
Well, and also there are, depending on how the town's governments are set up, some town halls, so some city councils have a lot of power. Like LA, they have tremendous power. They basically run the city. The mayor basically does nothing in LA. But in Pawnee, they're kind of mid-level effective. I love the town halls. They make me laugh. They're my favorite part as a fan of the show. And they were always super fun to do because they're just free shots on goal for you guys, for the writers.
It's just a joke bag, and you get funny actors, and the ones you love, they keep coming back, and some of them even have personalities later on. Like there's one guy who keeps leading chants, like he just starts leading chants. So and it was just a guy who just every meeting he would come like, okay, what chant can this guy do? And he must have appeared in 10 episodes. He just keeps coming back.
And then in little things, like I noticed Ron Swanson in the episode when the town hall goes awry. Ron Swanson is disturbed by it and tries to help Leslie through it. Later on, Ron Swanson will be looking into the camera gleefully and applauding.
It's figuring out character dynamics, and you're totally right.
Again, it's just hard to watch these, or I should say it's great. It's not hard because it's fun. It's fun to watch these first episodes and go, Ron Swanson doesn't have a pompadour.
Yeah.
Wait a minute. Ron Swanson's in a suit.
The suit drives me crazy.
What?
He's wearing this beige suit like every episode. Like, this is so weird.
Because I used to marvel at the fact that it always seemed like it was hotter than Hades when we shot Parks and Rec. Always. Partly we were in the valley. If you know anything about LA, you know that if you're in the valley, it's always 10 degrees hotter for sure. And Ron Swanson not only wore sweaters, but they were wool. And I just couldn't believe that Nick had to wear that every single day. But in the beginning of the show, he's in a suit.
Yeah.
I mean, he's like dapper.
It's like and poor Nick, you know, just a soldier, he never complained. But just I remember
never.
Those red sweaters of the basketball episode he wore to sort of mirror Bobby Knight, and he's just constantly wearing sweaters, like layers and layers. I'm like, dude, it's 100 degrees. Meanwhile, it's supposed to be like cold in Indiana, so everyone's wearing like heavy clothes. That happened a lot on Parks, right? It's like people wearing a lot of like it's a Christmas episode. Meanwhile, it's 100 degrees in LA.
This seems like an episode for me. Well, because it's the second episode, as you say, and you're really digging into the characters now. So back on the theme of Leslie not being the Leslie that she became, she has a joke in here that she would never say in season 2. And that joke is, I've got sunscreens for all of your beaks. And then she looks at Tom and goes, you won't need any.
Can't do that. Can't do that.
Not doing that joke today.
Can't do that, man. I mean, it's so funny because so many people who work on the show are like, you know, super woke people now, but it's 10 years ago. The climate was different. It's like when you go back and watch Friends or something. It's like, God damn, they're doing some crazy stuff on Friends. And everyone was watching that show. But look, the world has changed, and that's not a bad thing, you know?
Yeah, it is interesting to go back and look at how comedy, you know, is always a barometer of the times that, more so than drama, is really a barometer of the times you're living in.
Yes, that's actually a good point. Here's the thing I'll say also about comedy. You know, I'm not saying people don't get enough credit, but I will say when people talk about the greatest works of art, of film and television, you know, you always naturally go to the dramas. But comedy is hard. It's really hard to execute correctly. And when it's bad, everyone hates it. And it's, you know, like you can do kind of a mediocre drama. It's like, yeah, it's fine. You know, you don't see but if you have a comedy that no one's laughing at, it's like, it's bombing. It's bombing. And the floor is low. The floor is really low. So no, it is fun working on comedies you believe in and that work, man. And by the way, it's a more fun shoot day. Forget the writer's room. Like Rob, like you can speak to this. You know, a comedy shoot day is just different. I talk to actors all the time who do both, and it's a drama. Is like at the end of the day, man, what a great day of work. Everyone was in tears, and you go home and you're sad. So it's like that's your good day, right? And in comedy, it's like yeah, everyone had a great time. Everyone's laughing. Go out for drinks after. Like it is this bonding thing. So that's something I talk about with my friends who do both. Like you, it's fun, man. I like to mix it up because you know there's some stories that need to be told dramatically, of course, but comedy is fun, and I think I'll keep coming back to it until I'm aged out and I have nothing funny left to say. Same.
I mean, people, when they asked me what doing Parks and Rec was like as an actor, I had just come from doing Brothers and Sisters drama with Sally Field and Callista Flockhart, and John Robin Bates and Greg Berlanti were the guys who were in charge of it. So all good, but it's drama. And man, I was done. By the time I literally ended that show with me with a piece of rebar through my head, like Steve Martin with the arrow. That was how my character went out. I mean, that tells you how done I was. Because you can only do so much of that, and it just takes it out of you. And I did 4 years on that show, and then I did 4 years on Parks. And when I was done on Parks, I felt like I'd never started. The only thing that felt like work was how early I had to get there. That's it. The rest of it was like, oh, and Amy's here. Great. Oh, what time is Pratt coming in? Oh, is he here? Nah, he's not here today. Oh, well, I'm going to see him on Thursday. It was like going to a party.
And yeah, and it's like play. And the more people in the scene, the better. It's like, oh my God, I haven't done a scene with Aubrey recently. I haven't done a scene with Adam recently. And like, yeah, we still keep in touch, man. It's just very fun. And I feel like, you know, Aubrey texted me 1 second before this recording. She was like, do you have any recommendations for Modena? Like, can you help me with this one restaurant? It's like, yeah, we're still buddies. And I don't think that's the case on every show, right? I think, again, a testament to, I'm a broken record with this, but testament to Mike and testament to Amy, because it comes from them and the atmosphere that they set. But it was a really good group. I feel like no bad apples and just really fun. And that's what people want to hear. I know they want to hear that, but it is true on this one. It's like, we're not lying. Like, it is true.
It's not true on everyone. You know, I've been on shows that were wildly and some that were wildly unsuccessful. But where just the atmosphere was not good. And then I've been on a couple shows in particular where there was a lot of dissent among the actors, and you would just be like, "Oh my God, I have to work with this person again." That happens. It does.
Yep.
Not on this. I mean, and I think that love and respect, and you know what I think it stems from? Look, it's Greg and Mike's picker at the end of the day. They're responsible for who's on the show. And the people on the show are not only nice people, but they're all, this is the thing, super, super generous. Like, they want the others to be as funny as they are, if not funnier.
Yeah, and that's certainly, that was true of the writers' room as well. I really feel like, a lot of talented people, but really just, a dream job in a lot of ways.
I loved seeing Aziz, again, because we're watching these characters as embryos growing into full-fledged comedy beings. And when he put the headphone on and started making the cold calls, I was like, here we go. But even that wasn't the version it would have been down the line. Because, and here's what I go, what's different about it? Why is this the beginning of Tom Haverford we love, but still not the Tom Haverford we love? And here's my here. I'm going to posit this to you, Alan Yang. Tell me if I'm right. The main thing, even though he's doing his double speak, like running a game on people, which Tom did all the time, what he's not doing yet is he's not name checking every single culturally significant thing in the planet. Not once. And that, there's no way he gets through that moment in later scenes without quoting Kanye West or talking about Yeezys or something really even more obscure. No way.
Yeah. You can feel it. I was actually going to say something similar about those moments. We're talking about the filibuster being a sort of unlocking moment for Leslie's character. For Aziz, when he's in those scenes doing the headset thing, and then even at the end where he's hustling, like when I think he pitched some of these bits. I think some of these were improvised, some of them weren't. But he goes up to the Don Cement guy and he's like, "Here's a jingle for you, best bit, whatever." He does, like, he's doing that. That's all kind of improvised, and some of it was improvised anyway. And you can feel like, yeah, his energy is just much higher when he's allowed to kind of cut loose like that. And you'll see that. And then, of course, later on, there's a lot more rappers referenced. But in this one, I also like just the last line of the episode, which is very sort of, I think, character building for Leslie, which is, Andy's neighbor Lawrence is leaving and he's like, "Hey, Park Lady, you suck." And Leslie's like, "Hear that? He called me Park Lady." Like, that's like, see, like making it, an optimistic, turning any negative into a positive, looking on the bright side. And so that's all in there. And I think in this episode, it's sort of a melange of that and the sort of more cynical, ruthless version of Leslie. And I think that part falls away. And so, a lot of funny jokes in this episode, but that one was really sort of on character.
By the way, this is apparently one of the only episodes where Jim O'Hare is not in. Out of all, and he actually technically is in it very glancingly at the very, very top. The camera pans through, yes, and you see him in the background. But he has this is the only episode of Parks where he has no presence whatsoever.
So the best episode?
And that's why it's the best episode, because Jerry is not in it. I mean, we know when Jerry Gergich is in something, it's hard to be good. I mean, everybody who knows Parks and Rec deeply knows how we feel about Jerry Gergich. I could be wrong, but I think that Retta, who plays Donna, is credited as Retta Sirleaf. She's still using her last name. This became before she became Retta, one name, which I think is such a baller move. I mean,
I really like that. I like that she uses one name.
I love
forgot that was her last name.
Yeah, I can't even pronounce it. I'm reading it right now. I don't even know, because she's
Retta, yeah.
When you go one name, you're throwing down the gauntlet. I mean, when you decide you're a one-namer, you're like, Madonna, Cher, Bono. I mean, you're saying, "I've arrived, motherfuckers, and I am throwing down for the rest of my life." And she does. But this is clearly, she hadn't made that call yet.
Shall we do the Pawnee Town Hall? Let's go. Let's go. Right?
Town Hall.
So this is a segment where we take questions from you guys, the listeners, the citizens. Why don't we do this one? This question comes from Margaret in San Diego. What is something Rob learned from being Chris?
Here it is. Water. Have it in my hand. Be hydrated. I am 90% water, and so are you. I would say, look, Chris's thing is optimism, and it's like by the time I came on the show, you guys were so dialed in. You guys knew what the show was. You knew how to write to the people that were coming in, and that's why when I came in, I had a meeting with you guys and the writing staff, and you guys just got to know me and wrote to me and to my foibles and things that make me different than any other actor that would have done it, and the health part of it, and the sort of optimism and the energy, that became the hallmark of Chris, and because I think that's one of the things that has always driven me, and what Chris taught me was just to hold on to that stuff, and of course to be hydrated, and if I'm going to have a vitamin that's big enough, that may be a choking hazard, to make sure I have someone with me. To help me do that in case I need the Heimlich. That was a move that Chris had that I particularly thought was really, really smart.
I love that, man. I also drink so much water, it almost might be unhealthy. Too much water. But yeah, that's a secret, man. That's a secret to energy. But it is funny when you take, aspects and characteristics from the actor or actress themselves and put them into the character. And then it's almost like a recircling where like, oh man, like those elements of myself kind of redouble into my own life, right? That's like, it is true. I think that was true of a lot of the actors. Like, yeah, I'm going to lean into this. Like this character is like a heightened version of myself. It's like, maybe I am like that. You learn even more from it. But yeah, certainly it was a character. It was really fun to write for. And obviously you brought so much to it.
Thank you.
All right. That was Pawnee Town Hall.
You know what we haven't talked about? And that maybe this is, and it's so interesting. I think that it's indicative. We haven't mentioned once Mark Brandanowitz.
We'll talk about him at some point. Obviously, he's going to come up, but man, it's a loaded cast. Everyone's super funny and super like Rob said, in the tone of the show. And then when we added, Rob and Adam, same thing. It was like everyone's really funny and they're great.
It was like people forget in The West Wing, Moira Kelly was second billed. Moira Kelly.
Yeah, it's just like you just don't remember this stuff.
And it was like by the end of the first season of The West Wing, it was like glaringly obvious.
It happens. It
does happen.
Happens on a lot of shows that you don't even remember. I don't know.
By the way, I'm a big fan. I'm a big fan as an EP producer of when you know that, do something about it early and not late.
Yes. Think about we did another 100 episodes without him. 100 episodes.
Yep.
And that's all we have for this episode. I hope you enjoyed listening to our recap of Canvassing Episode 2 of Parks and Rec. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and tell a friend. Thanks to producer Greg and producer Schulte.
See you next week.
Goodbye from Pawnee.
This episode of Parks and Recollection is produced by Tamika Adams, Greg Levine, and me, Rob Schulte. Our coordinating producer is Lisa Byrne. The podcast is executive produced by Alan Yang for Alan Yang Productions, Rob Lowe for Low Profile, Jeff Ross, Adam Sachs, and Joanna Solitaroff at Team Coco, and Colin Anderson at Stitcher. Gina Batista, Paula Davis, and Britt Kahn are our talent bookers. The theme song is by Mouse Rat, aka Mark Rivers, with additional tracks composed by John Danik. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time on Parks and Recollection.
This has been a Team Coco production in association with Stitcher.